Hey guys, this is Jay Caldor with Jay Unboxing, here giving you my immediate reaction to the TKO victory for Canelo Alvarez, which took place over previously unbeaten Billy Joe Saunders at the AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. Now, just as a brief summary here, on Saturday night, as mentioned in Arlington, Canelo in a unification bout at 168 pounds took a little bit of time to warm up, but ultimately ended up punching a fractured eye onto the face of Billy Joe Saunders, and the fight was ultimately stopped in between the 8th and 9th round of a fight that actually Saunders was performing a lot better than most people suggested he might. Initially in the fight, you had Saunders actually jabbing, moving very well, giving him angles, and while Canelo was having some success and was landing from time to time, the jab of Saunders was working really, really well, and he was able to kind of dictate the pace a little bit and had Canelo swinging a little more wildly than we have been used to seeing him swing in previous fights. Saunders, much like he has had coming into the fight, had a lot of swagger in the ring. He was very confident, he was moving well, he was getting into his rhythm, but ultimately the continued pressure of Canelo as well as the power punching of the Mexican led to his victory. Now, a couple of things to get to in terms of the specifics. Firstly, let's start with some of the narratives that are going to be coming out of this fight. The first one is that Saunders quit. While he did have a apparently broken orbital bone underneath his, would be his right eye, the fact of the matter is, I don't think it was so much a quit job as it was him just knowing he was probably too injured to continue, and his team specifically. Now, the year is 2021, so the idea that a fighter quitting is a bad thing when they could potentially get themselves too hurt at an unnecessary rate really shouldn't even be an issue here anymore. He probably knew he had enough more than he quit, and that's a different thing to me. It's not like he just, the fight got tough and suddenly, no. He could not see. He had 50% less vision than he did 50 seconds ago. If he had injured his knee and simply couldn't stand on it anymore, and the corner said, well, this is an obvious, blatant injury, we have to stop the fight, no one would be blinking an eye here, no pun intended. The eye is equally important to the knee, so why we would try to outweigh one with the other really doesn't make any sense. However, what I will also say is let's make sure we nip in the bud this other narrative that Billy Joe Saunders was well on his way to victory, and he just happened to catch a bad case of just terrible luck and ultimately was sort of robbed of a victory here. For starters, it's in Texas. He's going up against a Mexican. He needed a knockout to win a decision to begin with, more than likely. Number two, and this is the most important thing, he broke his orbital bone on Canelo's fist, not his shoulder, his elbow, his forearm, not from falling into his shoulder, on his fist from a valid legal punch, meaning that's still the damage inflicted by the opponent. While it's a technical knockout, it's a knockout nonetheless. Ultimately, he still had to inflict the damage that stopped you. Whether it's for 10 seconds on the ground or it's because you can't continue, he did it, and therefore you lost. And that's the way that works. This narrative that somehow it's exposed Canelo means nothing. A boxer did well against an aggressive, come-forward fighter until the come-forward fighter landed. That's the way some fights work. Now, what's exciting to think about, I suppose, going forward is what's going to happen for either man. So let's start with the defeated in this case, a now once beaten Billy Joe Saunders. His options are interesting because when you have someone like Canelo rounding up all the belts at 168 pounds, it sort of leads you with not a lot of places to go from here. Canelo's not looking for a rematch, and quite frankly, there wasn't quite enough action for it to warrant an immediate one to begin with. So really there's two channels here down which Saunders can travel. The first is he could try to do a little bit of a radical play and try to actually go after Caleb Plant himself before Saunders. That might be a play that's potentially there for him. And it could lead him to potentially winning a championship and then earning himself an immediate rematch or eventually a rematch. However, is Plant more than likely to do that? The answer is no. So the more realistic odds is that he goes against foes that he either was about to fight or he has fought. The first one that he was about to fight was Demetrius Andrade, which is a fight that, again, could be made, maybe at a catch weight with Andrade fighting at 160 pounds, and it's a compelling fight for both who kind of need a dance partner now. The other option is a much more domestic fight that has a lot of potential money involved in it, which is a rematch with Chris Eubank Jr. And while he did pretty soundly beat Eubank previously when they were both undefeated up-and-comers, it's still a fight that draws. It's still a way for him to potentially get back into winning ways, and it's a fight that kind of leaves them both at that crossroads era where it becomes interesting in its own new, unique ways. Now, for Canelo, I mean, unless you're moving up or you're chasing a 168-pound fight with Golovkin, which seems unlikely at this point, your option is Caleb Plant. It's the fight to make, and it's maybe even a more easy fight to make now that you've beaten yet another undefeated fighter than it was previously, because Plant knows he just has to be one guy to have all the gold, and it was a guy that looked at times vulnerable in there with a slick boxer who has skill, much like Plant himself. Nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see kind of where they go from here. Let me know what you guys thought about the fight, about the stoppage, about where they go next down in the comments. Would love to hear that. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Be sure to follow at jcalderon_JOB on Twitter. You can email at jonboxing@gmail.com, and please be sure to visit jonboxing.com for all your results, schedules, betting odds, rankings, so on and so forth. And as always, until next time.